Afternoon, people. Gav Duncan here with...
Bálint.
Exactly, Bálint. And first in a series of English language podcasts connected to Hungary, not necessarily only about Hungary, touching on various different subjects, but we do feel that it's important we try to get the message out about Hungary, because there is a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation, a lot of ignorance in the Western world about Hungary, about why we do the things we do. People haven't been bothered to scratch the surface to find out why. Me and Bálint are hopefully going to explain a few things on the way. So, let's get started.
Okay. And just one addition to our new show, that the title is Black Sheep.
Exactly.
It's called Black Sheep
because we are essentially black sheep. Whenever you look in the newspapers, you look to the West, then the opinion of Hungarians is that we are the black sheep of the family. We're the black sheep of the European Union. We get a kicking every day from everybody in the European Commission because they are convinced, again, I would suggest due to ignorance, that we are the black sheep. In actual fact, we're not black sheep. The only problem is that they haven't bothered to find out that our history is slightly different from theirs. Our geography has dictated different things over the centuries.
Yeah, and we are caring about our own business, basically. And also, basically, it is the same in NATO, by the way. So we're also black sheep in the NATO, but we'll shed some light why
we're exactly. So, I mean, I thought today we would start by topic of the day was obviously the war between Israel and Iran, which is just finished. Fine, that's a military idea, but we've seen that once again, energy has come to the fore. Once again, okay, I don't dare to claim that I understand what the hell is going on. Everybody said, oh my God, there will be energy prices going through the roof. Everything is going to hit the sky. And then I saw in the Daily Telegraph, I think it said that the price of oil had dropped. Yeah. So I have no idea why that happens, but I'm not an expert on things like that.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing is that even experts don't understand what happened.
Okay.
So
all right.
It should have happened this way, but it hasn't. Why?
Okay. I mean,
nobody has a clue.
All right, fair enough. In that case, I feel much better about my ignorance about this. But again, we come back to the fact that energy is incredibly important now. Mainly because I would suggest that in the western part of Europe, not in the States, because the States seem to have sort of like come to their senses a little bit. Definitely not in China, definitely not in Russia, but in Western Europe, in Britain and Western Europe, Germany, France, people seem to have gone absolutely mad with this idea of energy and sustainability, and we must shoot ourselves repeatedly in the foot in order to save the planet. I mean, this seems to be very much the zeitgeist of Western Europe and the European Union now. I don't understand why. I don't think there's a good explanation why. And I see that, okay, Hungary is making efforts in that direction. We've got more and more battery factories being built. We've got more and more Chinese investment coming into the country, developing battery for electromobility. Fine, that's very, very good. But at the same time, again, when it comes to energy, we get a kicking repeatedly from the European Union and from everybody located west of us because they say that we're not playing along, we're not towing the line, we're not doing what they say we should.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the basic causes of this is that we have been an island nation, much more like Britain have been, but we are surrounded by people speaking a completely foreign language to us. And it's quite often forgotten that Hungarians came into Europe as nomadic people, herding people, horse archers, and those kind of cultural background, which is completely different from most European countries. So basically they were more or less Romanized, agricultural civilizations which had their roots this way or the other in a very similar civilization. We are completely different. Mm-hmm. And the Hungarian history is about struggle of repelling invaders from whatever direction. We didn't really have invaders from the north. That's why we are friends with the Poles, basically.
Right.
But we were being invaded from the south by the Turks, for example. We've been invaded from the east by the Russians or the Soviets later. And we've been invaded from the west by the Austrians. Right. So it's a constant struggle. And that's why Hungarians are a bit... on one hand, they are friendly towards foreigners.
Very friendly.
But also... in a certain sense, not in the way people use it, distrustful to strangers. I wouldn't call it xenophobic. People call it xenophobic. It isn't. Mm-hmm. We are distrustful for strangers because they always come for us. to help us, but for us.
I mean, this is it. I mean, once again, we come back to the fact that Hungary is located on 3 fault lines with the 3 empires which have traditionally always caused problems. The Russians, the Muslims from the south via Turkey, and the Germans or the Austrians.
Yeah.
Nobody west of us seems to think that this is a salient point. Nobody seems to think that this is perhaps why the Hungarians have developed this siege mentality.
Yeah.
The fact that when the Turks came, they stayed for 150 bloody years. I mean, this is not...
Austrians also, and then the Russians came and stayed for 50 other years.
I mean, the history of Hungary dictates that...
Yeah. Basically, we are taught to be self-reliant,
right,
and not to fall for big promises,
right.
And this is something people has to understand, that we are we're speaking a language which our closest relatives are the Finns, but Finnish even also resembles Hungarian. It's very much unlike the Hungarian in a number of ways.
Right.
So basically, our nearest relatives live somewhere in the Ural Mountains. So basically, this is something a language defines a culture,
right?
And if you live in a surrounding like in let's say France or Germany, where you have different dialects, but if you want to make connection, you want to have an interaction with somebody else, you can find a common language. This is not in the case in Hungary. So we don't even have very much dialects. We have 2 dialects basically, one in Transylvania and one in the north. We have some slight variances in Szeged, but that's all. And even those people understand each other quite easily. They don't have to switch to High Hungarian like Hochdeutsch or literal English or something like that. We don't need that. So this is the first step. And the second step is that basically this is economic 101.
Right.
You need to have energy to have a developed economy. And the more developed your economy is, the more energy you need. This is a very simple fact. And if you have a resource that is reliable, even though it could be hostile. We have a very tumultuous history with Russia.
Exactly.
We fought Russians 5 times in the last 160 years. We fought them in the 1848-49 revolution. We fought them in the First World War. We fought them in the Hungarian People's Republic. That was a fight against Russian influence as well. We fought them in the Second World War, and we fought them in 1956. Probably even the Poles have fought them less times than we have. So we are not in love with the Russians.
Exactly, which is another thing we are regularly accused of, that we are Putin's poodle.
No, we are not. We are
exactly.
not. We know, but when in your neighborhood lives an Eastern Slavic mafioso, you have to get along with him, and either you move away or you force him to move away. None of them is easy.
No.
So when you're living together, then you have to find a modus operandi, a modus vivendi. You just have to get along somehow.
And this, again, we're talking about practical politics. We're talking about realpolitik.
Yeah.
The fact that in the West, this seems to have been abandoned. Now everything in the West is seen, every political topic in the West is seen from a moral point of view.
Exactly.
And you say, well, but morals and politics should never be mixed.
Yeah. It's like gasoline and fire.
Exactly. It's a terrible idea. And the thing which I find astonishing is that most of the countries, or most of the commentators, most of the media are not interested in looking just slightly deeper. So if we take the example that the last Hungarian experience with Russia was essentially invasion and then occupation for 50 years.
Yeah.
And even then, if we say, okay, it's the Cold War, and we look to the West, and the West said, oh, of course, Cold War, East against West, West against East. They say it. Nobody ever says north-south or south-north, because it wasn't. It was always east-west, west-east. And as a direct result, they're giving the lie to what they say they believe, but it's not true. East-west, that's how it went. All of the gas pipelines, all of the oil pipelines were constructed not north-south, but east-west.
Yeah.
So when the Cold War finally finished, then Hungary still was dependent on Russian oil and gas.
Yeah, exactly.
And where did those pipes lead? They did not come. There was nobody saying, oh, now that the Cold War is finished, let's build a new pipework so that you can get stuff from Estonia, Lithuania, whatever, from the south. It was all east-west. And you sort of say, well, sorry, we're very sorry that you now have a problem with the Russians, a moral problem. You want to destroy the Russians, but please don't destroy us in the meantime, because we need energy. We only have one access point. That's the East.
We have more, but that's the cheapest source of resource of energy. And this is something people don't understand, that we are not a rich Western European country with a lot of capital to invest wherever one should go. This is one of the biggest complaints by the average Hungarian towards the European Union, that it was not what he has become is not what was promised.
Exactly.
And basically now what we see is that the basic truth about Europe and the well-being of Europe is twofolded. The first thing was rested on American security guarantees, which more or less were delivered on a very cheap price.
Yep.
In the last 20 years especially. Take it, like it or not.
Yeah.
The second foundation of European well-being was the cheap energy and cheap resources coming from Russia. This is also a not well-known and not very well-liked fact, but this is true.
But I mean, you wonder, how is it possible that this is not well known? Okay, not well liked because the Western world has decided that we must view Russia through a moral pair of spectacles. But everybody must know. I mean, as it is, the Americans get most of their uranium from where? From Russia. Yeah. The whole thing has become absurd. The European Union says that no European country can buy Russian oil and gas. So what do? They buy it from India after Russia transports it to India. It's like,
double price, yeah.
This is ridiculous. Who is going to be fooled by this? Okay, except that there are a lot of people who
a lot of people will be fooled by it until they hit the wall.
Yep.
And now we are coming to a point, slowly but steadily, when the truth will become visible. And what will happen then? And I don't understand that we are constantly lectured about democracy, about foreign policy and stuff like that. And I mean, please, we have seen our share. I mean, there's a very good term. I think it was coined by Tony Judd, an American social democrat. There is one, as strange as it seems. And he told me that you can't put a very good description about pornography, but when you see it, you know it. And we Hungarians have seen too many empires invading, conquering empires, that we see one and we recognize one, even if it is disguised as a friendship.
Exactly.
And this is what European Union have become. And this is the main reason why I resist so strongly most of the things coming out of the EU. Not everything, but most of the things. That these steps are disguised as help, but much rather we see a close of an empire.
I mean, every time we see, every year which passes, we see the European Commission giving itself more and more power, taking power away from the nation states. And when we look back to the original idea, it was meant to be an apolitical body.
Yes.
So what the hell happened? If we look back to the original idea of the European Union, when it was the EC and the EEC, it was all about, hey, let's do business together.
Yeah.
Let's make money together. Then there will be no war because everybody's making money, everybody's happy, all societies are flourishing.
Yep.
It was only when we started to say, oh, hang on, no. We treat our lesbian one-legged war heroes this way. How do you treat your lesbian one-legged war heroes? It's like, for the love of Christ, this is not to do with money. This is not to do with buying and selling. This is something other. We do not need to consider this. The European Union should be about people making money and remaining friends because they want to make money.
Yep.
They've lost. I mean, the European Union has lost its way. And the European Union, much as they like to criticize us for pointing it out, they have become an empire.
Yeah, and they don't like when they're criticized.
No.
If you criticize them, you are everything but a Democrat or I don't know, whatever.
This is the same European Union, which is the least democratic organization in the world, where people are put into place and then have huge amounts of power over everybody else.
Yeah, and they had no consequences. Remember when there was a European Parliament member who was found hiding a suitcase full of euros under the bed?
Exactly.
And he's still the member of the Parliament?
I mean, if you look to Salis, a woman who was convicted or would have been convicted in Hungary for beating people half to death. For terrorist acts. And what did they do? They quickly stepped in, got her elected into the European Parliament. It's like, well, you can't touch her now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a joke.
Well, I'm curious if she dares to come to Hungary, will she be arrested? Because that was a clearly terrorist act.
Exactly.
It was aimed at terrorizing and sowing terror in people's minds. So, but let's not get into it. I'm an irregular warfare expert, and I get very upset when I hear and speak things like this. But going back to the fact that what the EU has become. When in 1997, when I was learning about the European Union, I was told that there are two ways ahead. Mm-hmm. One is a European Federation, United States of Europe, and the second is the nations of Europe, which is a much lax, much more loose collection of states, like you described. We came here to make business, and we can get along well. No more war in Europe. That was the main idea. And I don't remember if we have voted about it.
No.
No. And the second thing is that even in 1997, there was a saying that there's a so-called democratic deficit in the European Parliament and the European Union. What happened to this democratic deficit? How did it disappear, or did it become bigger?
I think I would argue that it's become much, much bigger. The other thing which doesn't make any sense, and the thing that really undermines the idea of federal Europe, a United States of Europe, all the countries are so divergent. They are so different. They cannot be considered in the same sentence. You've got the Germans. Okay, the Germans have now managed to sort of knacker themselves and they are heading in the wrong direction. But for a long time, the Germans were the engine of Europe. The Germans were able to buy Greece. And you sort of say, okay, so these two countries are members of the same group, whereas this country has just bought part of that country. I mean, I'm sorry, there is no equality there. Yep. You cannot even consider them. When we've got such a diverse group of countries in Europe, where everybody has their own traditions, everybody has their own history, you cannot hope to force them together and say, okay, now we're all going to be the same. Because what's good for the German economy will not be good for the Spanish economy. Yep. What's good for the Spanish economy will not be good for the French economy. It's unworkable.
Yeah, but there's something most people forget, who had the dubious pleasure of not being ruled by communists.
Exactly.
We had this experience, and it was a very unpleasant one, but we've learned to read between the lines. And this is something very important, that from our point of view, with historical relevance and experience, what we see in the European Union is very similar what the Soviets wanted to achieve. Internationalism, which is basically means that oppressing everything which is connected to a nation,
centralization of power.
Yeah, centralization of power and all this kind of stuff. So everybody who is dissenting is an enemy. There's no chance of a good and honest discussion. If you go against our rules, you are an enemy. As simple as that. And this is not a democratical point of view. This is not a democratical approach. Democracy is about not violence, but it's about transparency and communication with the others.
But I mean, at the same time, when people lecture us on the problems we have with democracy, you said, well, turn the mirror on yourself. Look into the mirror and see what you've done. I mean, if we look at the Hungarian government now, how many times have they conducted referenda? How many times have they said, okay, we need to ask the people, what would you like? What do the people think about this? That is involving the people to an extent which you don't see in the West. And at the same time, the West say, oh, look at Switzerland. Every time the Swiss want to do something, they conduct a referendum. Yeah. So do we! Yeah. So do we, for Christ's sake. You didn't notice that we were doing this?
No.
And at the same time, you look to, say, for example, Britain, you look to France, you look to Germany, and there you've got the whole thing where the pyramid is as it is, that at the bottom you've got the people who are told, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
We understand. We're the political elite. We will tell you what is good and what is bad. You just have to accept it.
So let's get back to communists again.
Exactly.
That's a classic double standard.
Exactly.
Whenever I hear these kind of things, and people, uninformed people, I wouldn't call them arrogant or ignorant, but uninformed people.
Oh, I mean, that's you're
okay, but
you're splitting hairs here. Okay. I mean, uninformed and ignorant. Okay.
We are newcomers. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And we are steppe people. Okay, so we can be polite and we can be politically correct. We can allow this luxury ourselves. Okay, that we can be tolerant. And so whenever I speak with these people and I tell them facts, and I see the true horror in their eyes when they realize that I'm not lying, it's amazing. That's a completely different story, but shows the truth very well. We had relatives from Australia, and when I told them that we were criticized for the system what we have, and I told them that if Hungary builds a wall to protect its borders, it's much more civilized than what is the Australian Navy is doing, who is sinking refugees ships in an oceanic sea body of water which is full with sharks.
Exactly.
Man-eating sharks. And she's told me that it's not true. And I thought, okay, please look up on the internet. You have internet connection. Look up what are the rules of engagement for the Australian Navy when engaging refugee ships. And she was shocked to see that they have a permission to fire.
But how is it possible that she comes from Australia? She's there. I mean, we're not asking her to tell us what's going on in northern Canada. We're not asking her to tell us what's going on in Peru. This is the country where she lives. How is it that she's so, uninformed, let's be polite, underinformed about what's happening there? I mean, how is it possible? And she, no doubt, has an opinion
Yeah.
on Hungary's border defense.
Well, that's what we have to do, and that's why we're sitting here.
Exactly.
Basically, we have to face people the truth. We have to face them with the truth, how the world looks in reality, and not painted by the mainstream media and other lies of other sources of fake news.
Exactly.
Whenever I hear the word fake news, I'm just going to explode. Whatever we see in the mainstream media,
It's fake news.
It's fake news.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I admit I get very excited about this because it does irritate me that a country which has taken me in, which has wholly accepted me, is subjected to these attacks on a daily basis. And the thing which does rather get my goat is the fact that if you draw somebody's attention, you speak to a foreign journalist, a British journalist, for example, and you say, well, I saw your piece on Hungary and, well, it was full of inaccuracies. First, they're offended. They say, no, I'm a British journalist. I do not know the word inaccuracy. It does not exist. When I write, everything I write is gospel. It's like, no, let me explain. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then, instead of them saying, okay, I apologize, I was wrong, next time I'll try to do a bit more research, they say, what does it matter? You're a tiny little country of no significance. And you sort of say, well, that's just insulting. I mean, if we were important enough for you to write about in the first place, then how did we become so insignificant? It's like, oh, well, you pointed out that I made mistakes.
We have become a punching bag.
We have.
We have become a punching bag, which everybody who happens to walk around just lands some punches and then goes away as if nothing happens. But, someone feels the punches. And, the funny fact is that sooner or later, a punching bag becomes an how should I say, an opponent and starts punching back.
Exactly.
And sometimes I think people are really surprised and really feel threatened by the fact that those lies that they write will turn out to be lie. But because if it's one lie, then it is whole career which becomes questionable.
But the strange thing is, once again, we come back to the Hungarian history. We come back to the fact that, okay, throughout the 1970s, throughout the 1980s, when Western journalists wanted to get some information for whatever reason on what is happening in Central or Eastern Europe, then obviously the only people they could get into contact with were essentially socialist, communist journalists who were writing and portraying the party line. The problem seems to be that when the wall finally came down and the Cold War ended, nothing changed. Yeah. And these people still conduct regular conversations and they still provide information, even though that information is now...
Let me tell you a funny fact. There's a lady called Kaja Kallas. I think he's the foreign representative of the European Union. And his father was the main redactor of the party, Estonian Communist Party magazine. Okay? So we have a saying in Hungarian that people who changes his code becomes the same people.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what's happening. So there are a certain type of people who doesn't care about ideology, that they're on top. Nothing else matters. And we see them. And, we call these people in a number of very unpolite words, but the fact stays. And when people come here and expect us to believe that one person who was praying towards Moscow, now he's shifted to Brussels and Washington, he suddenly becomes a different person, and from a communist, overnight he became a Democrat, then it's completely unbelievable. There's a good saying in Hungarian, kutyából nem lesz szalonna, meaning that from a dog you can't get bacon.
Yeah.
But there's an addition to it, that from a communist dog you can't have a Democrat bacon.
I mean, it is frightening. The misinformation, the disinformation, I'm going to call it that. It is ignorance. And like I said, I do not have a problem with ignorance as such. I am ignorant about many, many things, and I do not want to know everything in the world. But I would suggest that if somebody wants to have an opinion, then we need to reduce the level of ignorance before you open your mouth. This is surely just...
Why don't you take a look on the both sides of the coin?
Exactly.
And I'm a guy with a completely... I've grown up listening about history. I'm a person with a interest in social sciences. I do know very little about natural sciences. But for example, when I speak with people who have expertise in this, ranging from a car mechanic to people in the academy, I always ask questions. I don't have an opinion because I don't know shit about it.
Exactly.
So I'm really upset when people come to an area without any knowledge and even we can talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect or anything else. But how can people take a position
without
in an area without knowing
information?
anything?
Exactly. I know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And okay, once again, we can draw a line. We can divide these people because we can say, fine, if a tourist comes here. And they don't know anything. Well, they don't need to know anything. They just need to know that Budapest is a beautiful city. Lake Balaton is fantastic. The sun shines. The weather is better than over there. Great. They can come here, enjoy themselves, and fine.
Yep.
But if we've got somebody whose job it is to report on what is happening in Hungary, report what is happening in the European Union, there it becomes a problem. Because now what you're doing is you're lying. Either you're lying through arrogance or you're lying through ignorance. But it doesn't make any difference. A lie is still a lie.
Yep. There was a story about Tom Hanks being in Hungary. I think it was 5 or 10 years ago. And he woke in the middle of the night. And he went to his balcony. And he saw ladies walking alone in the middle of the night. And he said he couldn't have imagined this. Okay, so this is also another story, another side of Hungary.
Yep.
And when I heard Sadiq Khan saying that terrorist attacks are normal occurrences in modern cities, then I was really upset because whenever the internal minister of Hungary or the leader of the counter-terrorist group would hear this, they would probably have to immediately resign in Hungary.
Exactly. This cannot be acceptable.
This cannot be normal, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, Sadiq Khan, but I mean, he's done nothing with London apart from make it very, very unsafe for everybody. He's just been knighted. So you can see that in London, things don't work the same way as they should here. If you don't do anything well, then we will turn you into a knight.
Yeah, but how long can it go? What do you think? How long it takes then when reality and truth breaks through?
I don't know. I really don't know, especially when I look back to the country of my birth. When I look back to what's happening in London, when I look back to what's happening in Britain, all over Britain, it seems that finally people have had enough. But the problem has been that there has, for the past 50, 60 years, all government parties or all parties in the political spectrum in the UK have essentially said the same things. Like, of course, tell us what you want, then we will do something else completely. Yeah. And now we're getting to the stage where I think the penny has dropped. I think people do realise that, hang on, the Conservatives didn't stop the migrants coming in, and hang on, Labour didn't stop the migrants coming in, and hang on, nobody's doing anything to help us. The problem is that even if the moment of truth comes and the light suddenly dawns on them and they realise, oh, hang on, potentially it's going to be too late to do anything.
I don't think so. It's never too late. Never too late. We have to give up some certain ideas which we used to have. I always speak about, when speaking about migration, do you know the term fiki-fiki? You know what it is? Okay, if the viewers don't know, that's a slang term for sexual intercourse in German, and there was mass events when groups of migrants use this word indicating sexual intercourse with locals.
Right.
And the group assault, robbery, and sometimes sexual assault followed. And you can't do anything about millions of people who were more or less invited here.
Right.
But you can't say no, you can't come here. This is our place and this is your place. And I have a running joke about the Emirates of Cologne. Emirates of Cologne. So you can do something. You won't like it, and most people won't like the idea of giving up some parts of the country. But this is the only way you can do. I know I'm very upfront people, and I'm many occasions I insult people with these very honest. How should I say opinions? But that's my problem.
But also that's a Hungarian trait.
It is.
I mean, how many times do we see the Prime Minister say, okay, let's stop beating about the bush. Yeah. Hungarians come out and lay it on the line. And it seems that this is part of the problem for the Europeans or for the rest of the Europeans, that they don't like it when the Hungarians say, no, A, B, C, that's it.
Yeah, and Hungarians say X. And the problem is that we have always been the funniest barracks in the communist camp, as they say it. And the second thing is that the Austrians, or basically the Germans, have a saying about Hungary that we are the rebelliöse Ungarn, the rebellious Hungarians. But this is true. the Magna Carta was established in Britain, and 3 years later, a very similar document was signed in Hungary, because nobility had the very same issues with the king like the Brits have, Britons have. So this is Hungary. We even have a Latin term, jus murmurandi, the right to murmur.
Exactly.
So this is our right, and we won't give it up.
But I mean, but once again, I mean, the fact that you just touched on the fact that the Magna Carta and 3 years later Hungary had it. Now, how many people living in Western Europe would even be aware that a small country like Hungary, which didn't used to be such a small country, we'll get into that.
At the time, we were stronger than England.
Exactly. But all of these things, we looked at Hungary at the beginning of the 20th century, which was possibly the worst century for the Hungarians to date.
Definitely.
But we look at the fact that the city, Budapest, was up there with the best of them.
Yeah.
In terms of modernity, in terms of metro, in terms of advancement, we were there.
Yep.
I mean, we're not claiming something that we don't deserve. We're just claiming that which we are deserving of.
Yep. Yeah. Basically, funny thing is that there's a certain, how should I say, there's a certain tendency to look everything from a certain point of view.
Right.
For example, if people speak about World War I, everybody talks about the Western Front.
Right.
But there was an Eastern Front as well, which was completely different to Western Front, and many things happened there. And let's name it, the World War I was mostly decided on the Eastern Front, because when Russia fell out, the Germans
moved all their people
to move.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was a thing that very few people talk about. But for example, if you speak about Second World War, everybody says that the Battle of the Bulge, the Battle of the Ardennes, was the last major German offensive, but it wasn't. It was in Hungary, the Frühlingserwachsen, the Spring Awakening, trying to reclaim Budapest and defending the oil fields in Western Hungary. So very few people talk about it. So this kind of approach needs to change, and I don't know if we have the time or the resources to change that approach.
But we're going to make a try. We'll have to have a stab at it. I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
this first show is a first.
Exactly, first step in the right direction to open the eyes of people to something other than the truth they have known. Truth.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent.
Okay.
Final word, not final word in the sense of last words, but
until next time when we'll pick it up again.
Yep, thank you very much.
Magic.